Welcome to Earth Tones, a podcast for creative souls and spiritual entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Alison and. This week I had such fun interviewing my next guest on Earth Tones, fellow bassist and new friend Brad Hallen. Brad is a fantastic upright and electric bassist and has been one of the busiest working bass players in the Boston area and beyond since the 70s. He has recorded and toured nationally and internationally with the likes of Ministry, Susan Tedeshi, Aimee Mann, Roomful of Blues, and countless other great musicians. Brad's bass playing supported many artists who were on major tours, opening for The Police, Culture Club, and Madness, bringing me back to my 80s roots. Brad also recorded with Johnny Winter, and I forgot to ask him about it. I'm a huge fan. One of the first bass lines I ever learned was "To rock and roll hoochie coo." I'll have to ask him about it next time. It's inspiring that besides being a great musician who played with so many artists and played on many albums, he is humble and genuinely a nice person who approaches the bass in its purest art form, an instrument of service. His genuine love of music shines through his work. That's why so many artists keep hiring him. It takes more than great bass playing to be a busy working musician for so many years. Brad Hallen speaks wisdom when he says, you have to keep a beginner's mind and that it's the connection that brings us back to the music. Brad shares a gem with us when he says, practice makes practice, and that having a practice is the most important thing as a human being. Here's my conversation with Brad.
Hello there.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hi, Brad.
Hey, Alison, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. It's so great to meet you.
Yeah, you too. You too.
Welcome to Earth Tones. So it's awesome to have a fellow bass player on the show with me.
My pleasure.
So, Brad, you've had many, many years of touring, gigs, session work. I was checking out your website, and you say being intuitive helps cultivate one's unique style and voice. And I think this is so true. I agree that intuition is a guiding force that helps us become and continue to be better musicians, good musicians. So tell us about you. How did you get into bass playing and a life of intuitive music?
Oh, it's such a long story. I'm 64 years old now, and I've been doing it full time since 75, which was the year I graduated high school. I was on the road 2 weeks after I graduated high school. And, back in those days, every hotel had a lounge, every lounge had a band, and you played 5 sets a night. Oh. And I did that for 3 years, and all the music was, it was Earth, Wind and Fire, Average White Band, Stevie Wonder. And I was 18, and I was working with people that were in their 30s that were already very established players. And, I got thrown into it. It's a really kind of an interesting story. And it's from an era that unfortunately has left us.
Yes.
It doesn't really exist anymore, So I went to high school in Fairfield, Connecticut. I got into music February 9th, 1964, changed my life because that was the night the Beatles played in Ed Sullivan. And like a zillion other kids, I was transfixed. I was, 7 years old, and that was it, and I went through a period of, I played acoustic bass, in grade school and the junior high school band, Pomp and Circumstance and all that kind of stuff. And I got my first electric bass probably when I was in 7th grade or something like that.
What kind of bass did you get?
It was a Kalamazoo Fender copy. I don't know if you remember Kalamazoo, but they were the original Gibson factory in Michigan.
Oh, okay.
And Kalamazoo, Michigan. Yeah. So, and it was like a white, it was cool. It was like Olympic white with a red tortoise guard, and it was awesome. I had a Sears amp, Silvertone amp.
Oh, that I'm familiar with.
And we knew like 3 songs, or something, but, we just kept playing them over and over and over. Playing in those top 40 bands. I played in 3 different bands for this agency. And it was called Complex 4 out of Bridgeport, Connecticut. And shortly before I graduated high school, I walked into the office. I just went there. I didn't even call the guy. His name was Dick Grass. And he was like one of these dudes that was chomping on a cigar with his glasses hanging down over his nose. And I walked in and he just looked up at me and he goes, "Hey, what can I do for you, kid?" And I said, "I'm looking for a gig." And he goes, "You're looking for a gig?" He goes, "Give me your phone number." He goes, "Are you any good?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm pretty good." He goes, "All right." So I gave my phone number. I went home, and about 2 hours later, I got a call from this guy, DJ, who was a drummer in a band called Old Glory. And he goes, "Hey, I got your number from Dick Grass." He was from Wethersfield, Connecticut. He goes, he said, "You said you're looking for a job." I said, "Yeah, I am." And he goes, "Well, are you any good?" And I said, "Yeah, I could play." He goes, "Well, play me something." I said, "What do you mean, right now on the phone?" And he goes, "Yeah, play me something." So I played him the lick to Keep Playing That Rock and Roll by Edgar Winter. I played him that and he goes, "All right, you got the job." And so
You needed a bass player.
well, it was just, there was
They
so
know you
much
were
work back then,
Yeah.
it was so much work, but I got thrown into the fire. I mean, he picked me up at 2 a.m. My first gig was at the Treadway Motor Inn in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I didn't know any of the material. We got there at 10 a.m. or something, and we rehearsed in the afternoon, and that was it. So,
That's the
you
best.
know,
And you're so right because people, musicians today, young students, they don't have that opportunity to kind of be thrown into the fire. How did you prepare for these gigs you were doing back then?
well, I think because I spent so much time with my head buried in a record player as a kid, just transcribing lines. Now, I wasn't, I could read a little bit then, but I wasn't really writing stuff down. What I would do, and this is still how I learn songs today. Like, there's a great interview with Bill Evans, and they asked him, they said, "What are you working on right now?" And he said, "As little as possible," meaning like 2 bars at a time. You know what I mean? So you take a little bit, you sing it. Because if you can't sing it, you can't play it. You can't really play it.
That's
You're
right.
just wiggling your fingers. So, and that's what I would do. I would take, little bits at a time. And Alison, after you study, like I've studied my favorite players a lot. And so when I hear them, if I hear a song that I don't know that they're playing on, I know what they're playing because I understand the vocabulary that they use, you
That's
know,
that's right.
and as you know, their vocabulary becomes our vocabulary. And, we take their stuff and then we kind of put our own voice on it. So,
And you can't help but do that. I think if you're, really being, true to the spirit of music by just being present, bringing your presence, your life, your art, who you're with, well, who the audience is, what the venue is, what decade it is, all these things come into play. And it's so true that you just kind of have to remain open, and listening is such a big part of it. And
mm,
I know that debate goes on and on, do we use a metronome or, practice with recordings is has always been my favorite. And I've definitely practiced with a metronome, um,
every day,
and
every
a
day,
drum machine. Yeah, every day. Nice.
every day.
Yeah, it used to be my best friend for a while. It was like, I'll just sit here with my metronome, just me and the metronome.
But you have to know how to use it. I mean, that's the thing. You don't use it with where it's, if you're every click is a quarter note, put it on, so if you're practicing at 120 BPM, put it on 60. So you got 2 and 4 is where the click is, which kind of emulates a snare drum, and then if you play double time, like if you're working on Cherokee or some standard and you want to kick it in fast, you play double time, then the click all of a sudden is on B3. And, there's just all sorts of different ways to utilize. I've been really fortunate, Alison, as I'm sure you have. Like, so many great players have been so generous to me, with their time and, letting me come over, not
Yeah.
charging me.
You grew up in Fairfield and then you moved to Boston.
I did. Yeah. 78. So I got off the road playing in those 3 different top 40 bands for that agency. And I'd had enough by 78. I mean, not only did I learn a lot about music and stuff, but I was drinking a lot. And I mean, that just kind of went with the territory. So
Part of the
I want, yeah. And I needed to do some other things. So I moved to Boston in 78. I knew it was either Boston or New York. I knew one person in Boston, nobody in New York. So I came here. And then that started, I was in a band really shortly after. My first gig in Boston was at the Paradise with this
Wow.
group called Pastiche, which won the BCN Rock and Roll Rumble when the whole thing was at the Rat. That was 1980.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, and it just, it just kind of snowballed from there. And I've lived in New York, I've lived in Chicago, I lived in LA, but I always come back to Boston because, I know so many players here and so many people, and I love it here. It's a great city.
I hear that a lot from one person to this huge community. I actually know exactly what you mean. I grew up in New York and came up in the 90s and stayed. I've been here ever since. And you're so right. So many musician friends, and you've done some pretty cool gigs and some cool touring. So you played with a band called Ministry?
I did.
I'm not familiar with that band. You'll have to forgive me. I'm gonna go down the rabbit hole now. What was that like? Were you playing electric with them?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I was in a band after Pastiche. I was in a few different bands, but one of the bands was called Adventure Set. And, we were, this was 80, 81, so 82. So, what was happening at that time was a lot of the European influence was heavy. The Human League, all the punk bands. I mean, and I love all that stuff. I still do.
Yeah.
I love it. And so we were playing somewhere, and Vince Ely, the drummer for the Psychedelic Furs, and Ian Taylor, who was Roy Thomas Baker's engineer on all the Cars recordings and Queen and AC/DC, and he's a really talented guy. They had a night out, and they came to where we were playing. I forget where it was. Might have been on Lansdowne Street, or maybe it was the Rat. I can't remember. But they came up to me and said, "Listen, we're producing this band Ministry out of Chicago at the Cars studio, Synchro Sound, and we need to have a couple bass tracks, and you seem like you'd be a good fit. Would you come down?" I said, "Of course." So I went down, and
Wait a minute. So you were on a gig with some other band.
yeah,
Who were you gigging with that night?
this band called Adventure Set.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I was saying, and we were kind of like a techno pop type of thing. I was slapping a lot back in those days and everything because everybody was, right.
Yeah.
I don't slap now at all. You couldn't
Oh,
pay
no,
me to slap now.
I'm not a slapper. No.
But anyway, so yeah, so they invited me down, and then and Al really liked me, Al Jorgensen, who's the leader of that band and the main songwriter, and he said, "Hey, you want to join the band?" And I was like, and I dug it. I mean, these guys were like, they had a deal with Arista. They were on Arista. They were managed by Lookout Management, which was, at the time had Tom Petty, Joni Mitchell, Devo, The Cars, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. So I mean, they had everything going for them. And so I went to the first rehearsal at the Cambridge Music Complex, which is now gone. It used to be down in Fresh Pond. And I walk into the rehearsal, and their other bass player was there. And it was Aimee Mann.
Oh, wow.
And
Till
so,
Tuesday, right?
pardon me?
Till Tuesday?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And that was early on for her because she was
in a band called the Young Snakes then. It was before Till Tuesday.
Oh,
So
I remember when her hits were out.
Voices Carry and all that
Voices
stuff.
Carry.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it was kind of an awkward moment, to say the least, because I wasn't planning on that. And I felt bad. And she didn't seem to really care too much, but we actually became very, very good friends. And I ended up giving her some lessons, and we hung out, and I played on her Geffen release on With Stupid and toured with her. Ended up touring with her later on in the 90s. So, I haven't talked to her for quite a while now. She lives in LA, but I'm sure if we saw each other, it'd be a big hug. She's a great person and super talented. But, so that's what happened, and then I joined that band, and they were based out of Chicago. So I moved to Chicago. I kept my place here. We moved there. And, we played, the band was big. I mean, for a club band, we played 1,000 to 2,000 seat halls on our own. And then we were on the Synchronicity tour with the Police, and we toured with Culture Club, Color by Numbers tour, and that band Madness I don't know if you remember them,
I do remember Madness.
but
Wow,
it was quite a time.
fun.
I was spending a lot of time at Synchro Sound, Allison, the car studio, because that's what we were working out of. And also the East Coast rep for Lookout was there. So we went there to get paid every week. And as a result of that, I saw Rick and Elliot and all the guys in the cars all the time. And I ended up playing on Elliot's solo record. And I recorded with Iggy Pop. And Rick hired me for sessions, so it just kind of, stuff like that happened back then, it doesn't happen anymore.
So later you toured with Monster Mike Welch. When was that? Like
That was late 90s. But I'd known Mike. I mean, he's a lot younger than me, and I knew him from some jams that I was part of a house band, here and there on Sundays and stuff. And his dad used to bring him around when he was like 9. And he already had a killer touch and vibrato and was listening to Albert King and everything, when he was a kid. Yeah, he's an incredible musician and just has huge ears. And yeah.
very cool. And that led you to, so you did some playing with Susan Tedeschi's touring band, is that right?
I did, yeah, and I recorded a record with her that never actually came out, but yeah, I was in Sue's band for a couple of years, almost 2 years.
This is a band that I'm familiar with, Roomful of Blues. I've met some of those guys, Phil and Ron Levy, and who else? Mark Early, I know, the sax player. Like, you guys must have did a lot of touring.
When I joined that band, we were doing 225 nights a year, and we played, all over the world. Went to Russia a couple times with them, Turkey for 3 weeks, and Europe countless times. Got a Grammy nomination for the first record I did with them, and that I did another record with them. Yeah, and Mark, you mentioned Mark. I have a jazz quartet called the Even Fall Quartet, which is Joe Barbado. I don't know if you know Sonny, but he's a great piano player. Played with Stanley Turrentine and Roger Humphreys and a ton of guys. And Mark is the tenor player in that group, or Arnie Kurkowski. We're actually playing tomorrow as a trio.
Oh, nice. Where are you playing? Where are you playing tomorrow?
We're playing the Trails End Cafe out in Concord.
So
yeah, just
cool.
a little trio gig. Yeah.
What keeps drawing you back to music?
Well, I think it's really important to have a beginner's mind. I mean, it keeps you humble and, as an artist. And, I struggle with that. I'm not like some spiritual giant or anything, but I do believe in how music correlates with being a better person. And I also think that, music is challenging. And as Jerry Beganzi told me one time, he goes, we're never going to get it all in this lifetime.
Exactly.
So we just do the best we can, a day at a time. And
Jerry is big into astrology too. That's one of my new passions. Some of it's just in the stars.
Yeah, my sister's really into it. She's a yoga teacher. And
She is?
oh yeah,
I love
Yeah,
hatha yoga.
yeah, she's a very established Ashtanga teacher. Her and her husband, and they have a lot of clinics and classes where they live. They live in Durham, North Carolina. But anyway, yeah. I mean, what draws me back? Probably the same thing as you, is that I'm just constantly searching. I'm just searching all the time.
That's right.
And and also trying to, just to connect. That's what brings me back, is the connection.
It's true.
Just making that connection to the instrument. And it takes a long time to actually really make that connection and start to really feel it. And I see a lot of players that are really talented and really good that kind of give up because it's hard. It's hard work. It's always hard work. There's no luck involved. I mean, some people are super gifted, and I'm sure I know people that are you just like turn on a faucet and it comes out.
That's right. It's like everything, tapped in.
But yeah, I'm just hungry to learn still, and I really enjoy it.
And if you're going to spend so much time doing it, you have to love it. So in a way, it's like the music finds you. And and Brad, I have to tell you, I just the other day I checked out your YouTube video, The Roots of Electric Bass, that's
Uh,
presented by the Providers?
yeah, that's a group that I'm involved with. I co-produced all of their songs with my partner Christopher O'Donnell, and yeah, so it's kind of presented by that organization. And
Well,
so
that's, I tell you, I love, love, love 60s and 70s music. And I'm just like a huge James Jamerson fan. I have that book. I'm sure every bass player has this book, or they should, Standing in the Shadows of Motown.
yeah,
Such a great book. His bass lines are like just they're so they're so beautiful in themselves. Uh, of course, it may not always be the place for. Actually, I would say you could take any of his lines, even just like two measures, and just loop it, slow it down, get into it, or even just take a piece of it, just to start to understand his vocabulary. It's so rich.
yeah, he had a large vocabulary.
So
Well,
this,
yeah, without Jameson, there's nobody, as far as I'm concerned, in electric bass. It's really, and even people that don't even know who he is, they're still influenced by him because the people that influence them are influenced by Jamerson. Like, so if somebody likes John Paul Jones and Led Zeppelin and they're like, I don't really know who James Jamerson is. He doesn't really influence me. It's like, no, he does, because John Paul Jones was his vocabulary is a direct lift from all of those guys, Chuck
oh,
Rainey, Jamerson, Tommy Cogbill, David Hood. I mean, those guys all, that's the Bible for me of electric
the real
bass. It
root.
really is. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's important to understand your roots. It really is, because I think it gives depth to your playing. It gives soul in a way. It's amazing. I think sometimes how much we need to be reminded of where the music comes from. I think that awareness just deepens your practice. It makes you want to keep coming back to it.
Well,
In
like you said, you got to love it. That's really what it comes down to. You got to love it.
You have
And
you have to love it.
you have to love it. And you have to be able to take the good days with the bad days. And because if you're really engaged, here's my motto, Allison:
Hmm.
practice makes practice. That's what it makes.
Mm. Yes,
That's
because
all it makes.
it
It doesn't make
reminds me.
perfect. It
Yeah,
makes practice. And having a practice is the most important thing as a human being, period. I don't care if you're a bass player or whatever you are, the practice makes practice. And that's my mantra.
I love that. That is such a great mantra, because when you go back to your practice, you naturally have positive feelings and grow. It's when you're away from your practice, or you've never really made the time for practice. A lot of the time people feel really kind of down on their playing, but have they really even done any playing? Have they really actually sat down and tried to work on the things their teachers showed them, or that they've seen, oh, I want to be able to do that. Well, there's more resources than ever to figure it out.
Yeah. And you
You,
have to be brave.
you have to be brave.
You have to be brave. It's not a cowardly thing to be an artist, because it's hard. And there's if you're sensitive, which I am,
Same.
sometimes, when I'm not having a good night and I'm not playing well, which, for us probably it means we're playing okay, but we're not really in the zone like where we love to be. You get that feeling of like inadequacy, and like, all those feelings that can make you stop having a practice. And there's been times, when I just wanted to throw it all out the window, but
Yep.
I didn't.
You did.
I might have thrown a fit, but I you know
It's like that saying,
kept going.
you're not as good as your last gig, because it has nothing to do with your ability. If you have an off night, or you're not gelling, you're not in the zone. A lot of the time it might have something that has nothing to do with your practice. It could be you didn't have a good night's sleep, or you're thinking about, what you're going to do the next day, or what's going on in your life. Uh, for the most part, I feel that whenever you show up to the gig, though, pretty soon you're transformed. You're like you're happy. You're psyched, because I think over time you start to, if you really stick with it, You find your people, you find your purpose, you find what music is your calling, all these things, but you do it. That's so true. You have to be brave. That's
Yeah.
such good.
Well, and the other thing is, like, I work a lot. Like, I probably have had 3 days off in the last 3 months or something.
So busy.
It's just been insane. And I'm not always playing with musicians that are listening. Not all musicians are listeners, even full-time players. It's
the
so
most important element.
it is. I know when I talk to younger guys and gals, I'm always like, so what's the most important thing about music? And they're like, geez, I don't know. How about listening? Listening. Because even a great soloist is always going to make you sound good, Alison, when you're playing behind them, and going to make me sound good. Like when I play with a great soloist, I'm playing at my peak performance because they're making me sound better.
And you're making them sound better.
They understand, it's not just about us supporting them all the time. A good soloist supports the rhythm section as well when they're soloing. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, I mean, I love it.
To think about it that way, that they're making us sound better too, because we love what we do. Like, you have to love playing bass lines and grooves. Like, when I find a bass line or groove I love, like, I want to stay there. I'm like, oh, I want to just keep doing this. So that's so true. And they make us look good, because I don't see myself as a saxophone player, but I love playing with them. So then together, we can create. But having your own personal practice is important too. And it sounds like you have done that. And I just want to end with just saying, so what's up for Brad now? Like, what's going on? You said you have a couple of gigs coming up.
Yeah, let me see. So I got a trio gig tomorrow. I got a couple gigs this week, a couple different projects. I'm working with this rock band that I worked with in the 80s, and I've reconnected with them because the singer, songwriter, guitar player is a serious triple threat. His name is Steve Cataldo. He is criminally unknown as a songwriter. I mean, people know who he is, but not enough people. And we are just finishing up a new record, and we're playing the Paradise the last Thursday of September, headlining the Paradise with a couple other local Boston acts. And so, just working. I'm just working, Alison. That's all. I'm working. Got some sessions, got gigs. What do you got back there in the corner? Is that a Lakeland?
My bass? Oh, that's a
Yeah.
Sadowski.
That's a what?
Bass. It's a Sadowski bass. Are you?
Oh, it's a Sadowski. Oh, cool.
Yes. It's
Roger does great work.
He does great work. I've been playing his basses for probably 20 years. I'm kind of a one bass girl, although I'm starting to think that I might want to develop a collection. But it does everything. So
it's a very bad disease.
It's
if you came to my house, you'd be like, "Oh my God!" But
I know.
Yeah. Do you know Trevor Healy? Do you know Trevor Healy?
I don't know Trevor Healy.
He's makes Healy guitars, and he's in East Hampton, Western Mass. But he worked for Roger for many, many years, and he's a great builder and luthier.
Oh, player. Nice! I'd like to get to know him.
Yeah, he's awesome.
So many talented people in this area.
There sure are.
Well, Brad, this has been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. So incredibly interesting to hear about your background, and inspiring myself to dig into something. As musicians, we always go in different areas. So a couple of things you mentioned, I'm like, oh, I gotta go check that out now. So I'm going to go down a couple rabbit holes. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. I appreciate you having me. So I got a couple questions for you. Are you a full-time professor at Berklee?
No, I've been teaching in their summer performance program for about 5 years. So it's a
5-week program?
It's the 5-week program. Yeah. We didn't do it in 2020, or I think actually there might have been a small portion of it online with full year faculty.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, I've done a couple of really fun things with the bass department. In addition to kind of helping them out in the summer for the auditions for 5-week, I joined them for a 25 bass professor weekend of bass madness with Victor Wooten and Steve Bailey. So that is one of the highlights of my summer. And I've done a couple of the guitar weeks with the guitar faculty.
Yeah, I've done a
Playing
few of
bass,
those things.
which is nice too, because I'm just playing,
Yeah.
they're leading, so I can just kind of enjoy being in the rhythm section.
Nice. Awesome.
Well, thanks again for being here. Great to have you, Brad.
All right, Alison. Thank you. I hope to see you sometime down the road.
Yes, we will. We'll connect.
All right.
You can find out more about Brad by visiting his website, bradhalene.com. I will have all the information listed below on where you can contact Brad and find out where he's playing next. Thank you for tuning into Earth Tones. I'm Alison Keslow. See you next time. Goodbye.